Welcome in, everybody. It is the At Home Dad with you today, hitting the Week 7 rapid rundown. We have the full slate of games. We're going to try and get it all in less than 45 minutes. That's the goal each week we do this. Gonna hit everything possible to get you set up for this week, from fantasy projections from the one and only Fantasy Data on Twitter at Fantasy Data NFL, online at fantasydata.com. It can't be any easier than that. Fantasy projections provided, stats, advanced stats, everything you need. Best of all, use the promo code FAQS, that's FAQS, and you'll get 20% off your subscription. We'll drop that banner in there in just a second. But fantasy projections, start sit advice, as well as injury news that you need to pay attention to get you ready for the full slate Week 7 rundown starting right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. It is the Fantasy Facts, hitting the whole slate for you today. Ready? Here we go. We're starting off Thursday. It's Thursday morning right now. We got a Thursday night game. That's why we set it up like this. We have New Orleans traveling to Arizona. This is going to finally, I think, maybe, knock on wood, going to be a worthwhile Thursday night game. It at least has potential. There is a relatively normal over-under in the game at 44. However, the fantasy projections are a little bit spread out. I think partly because we don't really know what we're going to get out of this New Orleans team or this Arizona team. The one thing that we can say, though, is that DeAndre Hopkins could be back. He is supposed to be back and ready to go for this game. What he is in this game, I don't really know yet. But if you've had him on your fantasy roster, you're probably excited to get him into your starting lineup. I don't see an issue with doing that. He's projected for just less than 15 PPR points. And just so you know, all of our projections are in full PPR, just to give you a heads up to that. But Hopkins projected for just under 15 PPR points. I think that might be a little high for his first game back, but man, wouldn't it be great to see him be able to go out there and get that? Kyler Murray is a guy that you're going to be starting in your lineups, even though he's had some games where he's just kind of let you down, like his 9-point total outing for the Arizona Cardinals this past week. Eno Benjamin, I am not playing him. Yes, he did get a decent amount of work, but however, he did not do much with it. The guy that I threw out there as a contrarian play, Keontae Ingram, completely missed. He only had 3 carries, but both of them just could not get anything moving. And Kyler Murray solidified his fantasy value with a 100-yard rushing game because both Eno and Keontae Ingram could not do much getting the ball going there. The big question mark is going to be what happens with the receivers in Arizona. You have Rondell Moore, who was just looking like he was going to take a pretty good step. But the question is going to be with the Hopkins coming in, do they just keep the same split that Rondell and Hollywood Brown had, because Hollywood Brown is out and probably going to be out for a couple of weeks with an ankle injury. Zach Ertz has been pretty consistent this week as a really solid plug-and-play tight end, someone that you were able to get probably as the 10th, 11th, maybe 12th tight end off the board. So he's been phenomenal for you. Keep him rolling in just about any lineup that you have him in. On the flip side of the ball, this is where the fantasy projections, I feel like, are trying to figure out what we're going to get tonight. It looks like Jameis Winston will get the start, but you're probably going to want to check as we get closer to the game time. Andy Dalton right now is, in terms of fantasy projections on Fantasy Data, looking like the starter. But honestly, neither of these two guys I'm that excited for, even though the Atlanta defense, their outside corners are really good, but there is a lot that can get taken advantage of in this Arizona defense. I'm expecting Alvin Kamara to have himself a day, and I expect Chris Olave to have himself a day, with Michael Thomas already being listed as out, with Jarvis Landry already being listed as out. Both of those guys are going to open the field for Chris Olave, who has just been phenomenal so far this season as he's been able to take over as the main guy there. Taysom Hill came crashing back down to earth. But I mean, if you were playing him, you're playing him because he gives you 20, 30 point upside. And the flip side of that is that he gives you, 0, 1, 2, 3 points of downside. And so if you're playing him, you're rocking him because that's exactly what you're looking for. And if you're not playing him, I get it. Like, yeah, there's sometimes I'd rather just know I'm going to get, and you don't really know until it happens, but you're projecting you're just going to get like a 6 to 10 point game out of your tight end, and you're happy with that, right? Because there's not the downside most of the time that you're going to get 0 points like you have the downside of with Taysom Hill. All right, that does it for our Thursday night game. Moving right along, we're going to Atlanta and Cincinnati. Atlanta traveling to Cincinnati. Cincinnati, one of the highest projected teams in terms of fantasy data. And this game, one of the highest projected over-unders in consensus. I'm actually excited for this game. I think Atlanta is coming on as I don't want to say contender. I think that gives them a little too much credit, but as a team that can be out there for upsets, and I am all about those kind of upset games. But Marcus Mariota has been doing enough where he becomes like a DFS play. I like that. It's not bad. Same thing with Drake London, again, doing enough. Kyle Pitts, you're going to hear it for probably the entire season because his level of involvement just has not been what people wanted it to be at the start of the year. But if you have Kyle Pitts, you're probably still rolling him out because of what he did just this past week. Not a ton of catches, but got the catch in the end zone and got himself a 10-point game. That's all you want from your tight end. If your tight end spits out a 10-point game, you're happy with it. And there's not going to be other guys that are really going to give you the same kind of upside. I know we just talked about it with Taysom Hill, but Taysom Hill doesn't get that upside as a receiving tight end. He gets that upside as a rusher, as a receiver, as a potential quarterback play. No other tight end gives you what Taysom Hill has the potential to give you. Kyle Pitts on the other side, he gives you more upside than pretty much the entire slate of tight ends outside of guys like Kelsey, who's already shown this year that he can put up a 4-touchdown game. Outside of that, I really like what Tyler Algier is doing. The only problem is he's not getting into the end zone, which is really capping all of his fantasy value. There's not really much point in playing a Tyler Algier or a Caleb Huntley unless you are in Bipocalypse, which most of us have the potential to be in Bipocalypse because, should have mentioned this from the top of the show, but Vikings, Bills, Rams, Eagles, all on bye, which takes out a whole plethora of guys that you're probably looking to play. But if that's the case, Tyler Algier is worthwhile in the sense that he's probably going to get you around 50 to 80 rushing yards because he's going to be handling the rock about 15 times a game. The question mark, though, is going to be his ability to score touchdowns, which with this Atlanta team, we don't really know where we're going to get them. And that's the biggest hurdle to jump there. On the Cincinnati side of the ball, touchdowns should be all over the place. This is one of the highest implied point totals of the week. Cincinnati at 27 because they're favored by 6.5 points. One of the highest implied point totals. And that's because you have Joe Burrow, who's been absolutely lighting it up. If you have him, you're definitely starting him. If you Jamar Chase, if you have him, you're definitely starting him. T. Higgins has been dealing with a bit of an ankle injury, but he is looking like he is good to go. Was on the injury report, but should be perfectly fine to get started this week. Also on that list was Jamar Chase, limited in practice, should be fine though, and tight end Hayden Hurst, limited in practice, but should be good to go. I like all three of them. I'm not a big Boyd believer. I think he is a guy that can be a sneaky play at times in DFS, but it's definitely a gamble and one that I'm not willing to make most of the time. But rolling out, definitely Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and Hayden Hurst. I think your wheels up on all three of those guys, as well as Joe Mixon. I think you can play him in here as well and get a decent outing from Mixon. Moving right along, I got my Cowboys stuff up behind me. Game I'm excited for, Detroit versus Dallas. Detroit coming off the bye. Hoping that you're getting Amon-Ra fully healthy. He was a full participant in practice. You're also hoping to get DeAndre Swift fully back and healthy. And it looks like he was limited participant in practice so far this week. But on the other side of that, it looks like we're getting Dak back. The Cooper Rush experience was fun all the way up until he ran into the now 6-0 Philadelphia Eagles, who are on bye. But Cooper Rush looked good, played well up until the Eagles pressured him, took the ball away, put him in situations that he wasn't comfortable in. And I'm not going to say if Dak Prescott was the quarterback that the Cowboys could have beat the Eagles this week, but I do think that it may have been a different game. Cooper Rush had a great run, which came to the end. And I wonder if we have Joe jumping in the comments here, but 5-1 as a Cowboys starter. We got a trade offer jumping in here. Again, jump into it real quick. Tyler Lockett and Miles Sanders for Jamar Chase. I received Chase. I would do that in a heartbeat because not only is Chase one of the top wide receiving options, he also has what looks like on paper going to be a cake schedule for pretty much, I think it was all the way until week 16 and 17. So right up until the championship. But even with a guy like Jamar Chase, you're not going to sit him in a championship type of game. We saw last year what he can do in a championship type of game. Yes, Miles Sanders has been a really good option. Yes, Tyler Lockett has been a good option, but Jamar Chase is an elite option and has a cake schedule. I'm going with Jamar Chase over Lockett and Sanders. And if that's, assuming that you have some backup in your receiver room or really your running back room to be able to survive what's going to happen over the course of the season with buys coming up and the who knows what's going to happen with injuries that we know we get all the time. Thank you, Jacob, for dropping that in there. Hopefully you liked the comment. Feel free to jump in, drop any more that you have there. To keep things moving, Zeke has been a touchdown play. If you have him, Pollard has been a receiving option. If you have them, they're worth mixing into lineups. They're worth playing because you have guys like Miles Sanders on bye. You have Cook on bye. It's, you have some guys that are going through injuries. So definitely keep them in the lineup. CeeDee Lamb was a limited participant this week in practice, but you're starting CeeDee Lamb. He's just been there too much. Has been targeted too much to not play. And Jacob, thank you. Glad you accepted it. Not an idiot. I think that is a great play because you are getting to that elite level. And then starters now, Lamar, Kamara, Jones, Devontae Adams, Waddle. I like it. I think you're going to be in a pretty good spot to be able to keep pushing for the championship, or at least playoffs. I don't want to get your hopes up too much, and then you get pissed off at me later on. But I think with a squad like that, you definitely have playoff aspirations, especially now that you put Chase in that lineup as well. All right. Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate that. Shout out to you, man. Anything that comes up, feel free to hit us up. We're on Twitter. We're here every week. Hit us up. We usually do a Tuesday night show too, but we've been dealing with some personal issues. So that's why we're just want to jump into this one. But thank you, Jacob. Appreciate that. All right. Flip side of the ball. I already talked a little bit about Detroit. I want to make sure I hit them all. You're firing up Amon-Ra St. Brown if you have them. Jared Goff has been a playable quarterback, especially as a streamer. I think both Goff and Dak Prescott, you're rolling them out tentatively this week just to see how they're going to come back from injury with Dak and back from the bye with Goff. Swift, again, you want to check that injury, make sure that he is good to go. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot in that Detroit game. Detroit side of the ball that I'm that excited for. Moving right along, we're going Indy, traveling to Tennessee, and it looks like we may get Jonathan Taylor back, ready to run. He was a limited participant, hoping that we get him back, ready to go, because, man, oh, man, do we need that in fantasy football right now, having who probably was the running back one, if not CMC, the running back one off the board. We really need him to get back in there. And then also Derrick Henry has been coming back. been playing well. Both of those two guys are auto starts if you have them. Quarterbacks, though, definitely not auto starts. Yes, you can mix them in terms of desperation or super flex, but definitely not guys that I'm trying to get into lineups at all this week. And then in terms of receivers, same thing. I am not excited about anything on the Tennessee side of the ball in terms of receivers. Maybe you can sprinkle in a little bit of Robert Woods, but I'm not excited about any of that. On the Indy side, I am firing up Michael Pittman. I think you have I think if you have him, you're definitely playing him. And Alec Pierce is a guy that you may be able to sprinkle into some lineups just as he's gaining more and more and more in terms of targets, in terms of snaps, in terms of routes run. I think Alec Pierce is defining his role in this Colts offense. I'm not starting him over guys like Drake London or Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, anything like that. I think that's kind of absurd. Not going to do that, but over guys like maybe Donovan Peoples-Jones or somebody like that. That similar kind of tier of flex play wide receiver. I don't mind throwing Alec Pierce into that. And outside of that, there's not a whole lot to love here. It's a relatively low over-under, and it's one of the lowest fantasy projected games across the board. And so, yeah, we're going to stop talking about the Colts in Tennessee there. We're going to move now to Green Bay. I was just in Green Bay last week, had a great time watching the Jets. I am actually live in New York, despite all the Cowboys fandom, but went with some Jets fans to watch Green Bay just get absolutely demolished by that Jets defense. 2 blocked kicks for the Jets, a blocked kick for Green Bay, and the Breece Hall just kind of take over. But we'll get into that in a little bit. It makes me kind of nervous to start a lot of the players on Green Bay. But against a Washington team that can be beat, I think you're probably going to roll out guys like Aaron Rodgers if you have them. You're probably going to roll out Aaron Jones if you have them. You're probably going to roll out Allen Lazard if you have him, but probably in a flex play type of position. Romeo Doubs has been taking a back seat. I think that's partly because the offensive line of Green Bay hasn't been able to give Aaron Jones really the time to throw any of those big highlight plays that Romeo Doubs has really been able to take advantage of earlier on in the season. I'm starting them in some places where I have to start 3 wide receivers in multiple flex positions because I just don't have a ton of other options. And Romeo Doubs is a touchdown option for this Green Bay team, especially against a Washington team that has struggled. And Green Bay, we should see some fantasy points out of them in this game. Hoping for it. Not too excited about A.J. Dillon, not too excited about Robert Tonyan, mostly because of the split with Dillon and Aaron Jones. Yes, Dillon has been able to come on. I don't like the flipping a coin and trying to figure out which one of those guys it's going to be. I'm going to take Aaron Jones because of his receiving chops over A.J. Dillon as the guy that I want to start as the running back in this lineup. But you never know. A.J. Dillon might get a couple of goal line carries and get into the end zone, which makes him the ending play for that week. Washington side of the ball, I am not excited about starting anybody here except for maybe Terry McLaurin because you have to start. Not you have to start him, but he's pretty much you got to start him if you have him. You paid up for him. And Curtis Samuel, who's been leading the targets in this backfield. In this receiver core. I am not excited about starting Brian Robinson again. I wasn't excited about starting him last week. He was very, very, very mediocre, very pedestrian rushing the ball, except for a 16-yard rush at the very end of the game when it no longer mattered. And the touchdown run. Other than that, he was getting maybe a yard, maybe 2 yards a carry. Antonio Gibson looked like the more dynamic player, but just wasn't getting used until he didn't touch the ball until the third quarter. So that puts this whole team in a situation where I feel like you're not going to be able to determine who's going to get the ball when, and whether or not Brian Robinson falls into the end zone again, whether or not Antonio Gibson because he did look like the more explosive player, they put him in space with play design. It's going to be real tough to kind of discern who's going to get the ball out of there. So I'm not excited about starting either of those guys. And yeah, that's the Washington side of the ball. I'm not playing Heineke. I'm reluctantly, because I have to, rolling out McLaurin and Samuel. And then, depending on absolute need, Robinson or Gibson, but I really don't want them in my lineup unless I need them in there. All right, next up on the list is Tampa Bay and Carolina. Tampa traveling to Carolina. This game, again, is one of the lower over-unders at only 40.5, one of the lower fantasy projections as an entire team. We're expecting Tampa Bay as a team to put up over 100 fantasy points, which is pretty good. But on the flip side, Carolina, we're only expecting 77 as an entire offense. And that 77 is going to be made up pretty much of Christian McCaffrey. And that's just about it. And yes, I'm rolling out Christian McCaffrey. And that's it. Wrap it up right there. That is the entire Carolina side of the ball. I don't want PJ Walker. I do not want DJ Moore. It's just gross across the board for Carolina. I'm firing up Christian McCaffrey, but that's just about it. And you're hoping that he's getting another, 7-9 receptions like he has in the past couple weeks. But yeah, that's just gross on that side of the ball. It is the largest spread of the week at 10.5, obviously in favor of Tampa Bay. And that's because you have Brady, who should be a starter on your roster if you have him. Probably because you picked him up relatively late, and he'll be your main quarterback. Leonard Fournette, if you got him, you're rolling him out there. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, if you got him, you're rolling him out there. I'm not throwing in a guy like Russell Gage. I don't want to play Cade Otton. I feel like 2 weeks ago I said Cade Otton is a decent play. He was a decent play then. I think we have a healthy set of wide receivers now. Cade Otton does have the potential to fall into the end zone, especially with Carolina, who has an okay defense, but their offense just does nothing for them where the defense gets worn out. So there is a possibility that Cade Otton gets a goal line touch, falls into the end zone. It's always there, but I'm not expecting like a five reception, 50-yard game out of Cade Otton, which is what you really need to have a streamable type of tight end, getting to that 10 fantasy points. And that's it. Julio Jones is still limited. Rashad White needs to fully take on a solidified role before you can roll him out there. So that's it for the Tampa Bay side of the ball. I do think they roll Carolina this week. And yeah, I think you get those main group of starters. But other than that, I don't think you have much else to roll out there. Moving right along to a team that has basically no wide receivers, but keeps finding a way to coming back. And that's the New York Giants. They are traveling to Jacksonville this week, a relatively close game with only a 3-point spread. And I don't know. I feel like you kind of got to take the Giants here. They're on such a roll here. And Jacksonville's been so hit or miss. You're going to get plus 135 betting money line on the Giants, which isn't too bad. Over under at 42.5. Both of these teams, not much in terms of fantasy projection. Both of them in the in the 80s, 81 for the Giants and 87 for Jacksonville. For the Giants, you're rolling out Saquon Barkley without really any hesitation. You may be throwing Daniel Jones in there for rushing upside, at least as a QB2 in Superflex. Probably not in a one quarterback league unless you're really desperate and trying to stream. And then probably Wan'Dale Robinson, getting him in the mix. Daniel Bellinger has been a decent streamable tight end. And then outside of that, it's a hodgepodge of wide receivers. Darius Slayton let me down this past week. I was hoping that the week 5 output that he had, where he was one of the most targeted players on the team, had the most receptions on the team, had a big game in terms of yards. I think it was at 79 yards, and then did basically nothing for you this past week. Marcus Johnson's mixed in there. Richie James is also mixed in there. David Sills has been mixed in this season. I don't want to really play any of it because you never know who it is. You're basically playing pin the tail on the donkey. You're blindfolded, just hoping you hit something. On the flip side of the ball, we are getting the Travis Etienne James Robinson split here in PPR. The lean is a little bit towards Etienne unless J Rob can get into the end zone. I would say another week to see what shakes out, especially with a looking at game plan and how the games have gone. We want to get a better sense of what can we expect longer term. And just because it happens in one game doesn't mean we can expect it throughout the season. Christian Kirk has made himself a very flexible, very happy, flexible start play. And Trevor Lawrence, like I would probably start. I don't know if I'd start Trevor Lawrence against the Giants defense right now because they've been doing all right. But that's kind of like that David. Can't speak now. I kind of like that Daniel Jones versus Trevor Lawrence, like backup QB type of play, streaming QB type of play. I might give a little bit of leeway to Daniel Jones just because of rushing upside over a guy like Trevor Lawrence. And then outside of that, I'm not excited about like playing a Zay Jones or an Evan Ingram or a Marvin Jones, who is also on the injury list. Not too excited about that. I would rule out Christian Kirk, though. All right. Next up on the list is Cleveland and Baltimore. This game, you got to rule out Lamar Jackson if you have him. Shout out to Jacob, who was just in here with Lamar as his starting quarterback. This is a relatively modest over-under at 45.5, but it's one of the higher over-unders of the week. And most of that's coming on the heels of Baltimore being a 103-point fantasy projected team. Cleveland on the other side only projected for 86. Despite a little bit of disappointment from Chubb and Hunt, I think you can roll both of those guys out, especially with running backs being a bit scarce this week. I'm not rolling out Brissett unless it's a dire need. And Amari Cooper, I think you can throw him in there and keep rolling it out. He was on the injury report along with David Njoku. You want to keep track of that, but these are mostly Wednesday injury reports, which can be veteran days. But just something to keep in mind. They were limited participants and streamable guys. Cooper, you're probably going to get into your wide receiver lineup. If not a starter, maybe as a flex. And David Njoku is a decent streamable tight end. For Baltimore, like I said, you're starting Lamar Jackson, you're starting Mark Andrews. You are probably going, what the hell do I do with J.K. Dobbins and Kenyon Drake? After the game, it was said, Harbaugh said that J.K. Dobbins was on a pitch count, which was pretty apparent when Drake kind of went in there and had over 100 yards rushing and ripped off some really big chunk plays. But I'm not starting either of them unless it's absolute desperation. I do not want them in my lineups. I don't want J.K. Dobbins on a pitch count. Yes, J.K. Dobbins has plenty of upside. Yes, Kenyon Drake has plenty of upside if he can do what he did last week again this week. But I don't want to play that gamble. I don't want J.K. Dobbins to be like, man, I hope he's going to be the guy that breaks off a big run this week, and then he's on a pitch count again and he does pretty much nothing for me. And I don't want Kenyon Drake to gamble and be like, man, I'm really hoping that he comes in and does what he did last week. And now J.K. Dobbins gets a healthy workload, and I'm stuck with Kenyon Drake in my lineup with next to nothing. Obviously, that's, kind of whatchamacallit. That is league dependent and who you're playing dependent, but it is not a play that I am excited about. And also keep an eye on Rashad Bateman in this one. I think he's a play if he's good to go, but he was a limited participant, still dealing with his injury from last week. All right, next up on the list, we have the Jets. Like I said, just got to see them defense just absolutely annihilate the Green Bay offense. They are traveling to Denver. This is the lowest over-under of the week. I think they are underestimating a little bit of the Jets' offense, which I think is at the hands of Breece Hall. I think we are seeing that full ascension. I didn't think it would happen quite like this, but Breece Hall definitely seems to have all of the tools, everything he needs to just be a fantasy play. If you have them, you are definitely starting them. If you can, I saw a bunch of trade offers, especially on Twitter and in some DMs this past week. If you have the opportunity to go get Brees Hall, I think you do it. Yes, the value is probably going to be a little bit higher now, especially after the week he just put up against Green Bay. But I think you still do it, anticipating having him for the rest of the season. Zach Wilson, you're probably not rolling out there. Garrett Wilson has been tough to be able to start. With Zach Wilson back in there, all of the pass catchers, we're still trying to figure out who is going to be the main pass catcher outside of Brees Hall for this Jets team. And I think we wait to see what happens there a little bit longer before we roll out any of these guys as your main option. I do think it's too early to cut bait on Garrett Wilson, though. I think that we are going to see, hopefully, Zach Wilson and Garrett Wilson start to get a little bit of a bond going and can move forward pretty well. On the Denver side of the ball, oh, sweet baby Jesus. Man, they are tough to watch. I apologize, Denver fans, but man, oh man, they are tough to watch. Russell Wilson released another dangerous sandwich commercial, which is, I don't know what's more torturesome, watching those commercials or watching him play. I really don't want anybody on this Denver team in any of my lineups, except for maybe a Latavius Murray as a DFS play. I don't want Gordon or Murray in any of my managed leagues. Cortland Sutton is the best option out there. I'll roll out Cortland Sutton in managed leagues. I'll roll out Jerry Jeudy in managed leagues. But what they did, what the Jets did to kind of shut down Green Bay, what they've done to shut down a couple of the teams that they've been playing against, their defense has opportunities to make plays. And I could see them putting some pressure, especially on Russell Wilson, which will make things difficult for Cortland Sutton and both Jerry Jeudy. I'll also throw out there Mike Boone is probably cuttable at this point. You'll be able to pick him up if anything shakes out with this backfield, but he's probably cuttable at this point. And Greg Dulcich looks like a play where you can pick him up. I'm not playing him yet in any managed leagues, but he looks like an opportunity for you to go out and pick him up. As we hit the next 4:00 game, we're traveling with Houston to Las Vegas. This is a game that I'm actually excited for, this 4:00 game. There's a lot to love in the 4:00 games this week. They have the 3 highest over-unders of the week. Well, so not quite, sorry. They have 3 of the 5 highest over-unders of the week. I'll make sure I'm accurate in my statements. And Houston, Las Vegas comes in, again, pretty modest over-under at 45.5. But one of the higher ones of the week. I like a lot of the plays in this one. I like Devontae Adams. I like Josh Jacobs. I'll even throw in there Derek Carr and a streamable guy in Hunter Renfrow. Darren Waller, I want to see him do a bit more. But if you picked up Darren Waller, you probably picked him up as somewhere in the top 5 tight ends. So you're probably going to be rolling them out because you probably don't have many other options unless you were able to grab like a Higbee who's on bye, or like a Gerald Everett who's nursing an injury, Hayden Hurst, like those types of guys. And you're not playing those guys over like a Darren Waller just because of the upside that Darren Waller provides for you. On the flip side, my boy Dameon Pierce. I may have been wrong about how Brees Hall was going to take over the Jets offense, but I was damn right about Dameon Pierce taking over this Houston offense. I'm just hoping now that this offense can start taking more strides so that Dameon Pierce can become a fantasy stud in the sense of scoring touchdowns as well. He has had some big breakaway runs where he's been able to score. He's the basically the focal point of this Houston offense, and I am here for it. Play him. I'm playing him wherever I can. Davis Mills he has a decent opportunity this week. I think he is a relatively low cost, high risk, like high risk as in like high upside play, especially in DFS, especially as a second quarterback in Superflex, because Las Vegas hasn't been great against stopping the pass. I think Davis Mills could get a little bit of work here. Hopefully, Dameon Pierce catches a few balls this week. But I think you can also roll out a little bit of Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins in this game as well. Outside of that, nothing really looking for this Houston and Las Vegas game. Really like those top set of guys in there, though, and really like Dameon Pierce over a lot of other options, especially on running back needy teams. Next up is the 425 games. It is Seattle going to the Los Angeles Chargers. Man, there's a lot to unpack in this game. Geno got brought back down to earth in this last game. Arizona was able to get after him quite a bit. I am curious to see if the Chargers are able to get after him in the same way. But Geno Smith has been a guy that you're probably going to keep rolling him out in lineups if you have him. One, because he's been a streamer for you, and you probably got him dirt cheap, so he's probably the best option you have out there. And he's been able to put up some pretty decent fantasy weeks. Kenneth Walker is a guy that I do like. I think he is going to get work. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I feel like we have the same thing going on that we've had for a couple of years now with both of these guys, where you're going to hit the jackpot a couple of times, and both of them are going to have great games, or you're going to get a great game and an okay game, two okay games. Like, it's really tough for them to both really dominate unless they're able to both break away with something and get into the end zone with it, or become just hyper targeted in a game because that's what the defense is giving them. And against this Chargers defense, I think there is opportunities for them to be able to be either hyper targeted or break away and score a touchdown. With that being said, I think the Chargers are able to score against this Seattle team, which is going to hopefully mean that they throw the ball a little bit more, help those guys out some. But I think you have Justin Herbert have himself a pretty good game. I think you have Austin Eckler have himself a pretty good game. Both of them with fantasy projections of 20-plus points. That does seem a bit rich, but I do think both of them can achieve that. Mike Williams is coming in next at 15 points. Keenan Allen is now a limited participant, which is good. Maybe he comes back and is healthy because they kind of need that. Gerald Everett was also a limited participant, but has been able to really kind of solidify himself as a good streaming option at tight end. And I'm all for it if he's there. If Keenan Allen comes back, it may make me a little bit more hesitant with rolling out Everett. Not so much on Mike Williams, because I think even if he shifts to the wide receiver 2, he's still going to hold value there. But it makes guys like Joshua Palmer just kind of fall completely off anybody's radar, if they were still on anybody's radar at that point. And the next one, and just to throw this out there, that is the highest over under of the week at 51. So everybody's expecting points to be scored in that Seattle LA game. So expect lots to happen there. The next highest over under, really the third highest, is coming in with KC and San Francisco. If you listened to us last week, I said Jimmy Garoppolo is a streamable quarterback, which he turned out to be. He did pretty well last week, got you 20 points, which is a decent streamable opportunity. I think he can be streamed again. He's projected for 15 points. I don't mind playing a Jimmy Garoppolo this week over a guy like Dak if I want a safe floor versus higher upside. I think Dak obviously gives you higher upside, but the injury concern and coming back from injury makes me a little bit hesitant. I want to see how these Cowboys function with Dak healthy. And Jimmy has been rolling with this San Fran offense. And I think you got to give it to him and give the ball to Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Jeff Wilson. I think those are all guys you can work into your lineup some way, shape, or form. Kittle has been a bit disappointing, but again, he's a guy with plenty of upside. I probably wouldn't start a guy like Gerald Everett, Higbee, etc., guys like that, over top of a guy like Kittle, especially, obviously with Higbee on bye. Guys like Dallas Goedert on bye. I probably wouldn't. I'd be rolling Kittle out there with all hope that he's gonna finally get into the end zone with some success this week. On the flip side of the ball, you have Travis Kelce, who is the number one tight end option out there. Fire him up wherever you can. Fire up Patrick Mahomes wherever you have him. Juju finally got himself rolling. I was hoping that we would see more of that out of Juju, and I hope we're able to see more of it continue. I am playing him as a flex play. You're probably going to be throwing up things like Juju or Ayuk type of start sits. I would roll with Juju just for the touchdown potential. I think you have more of that with KC than you do with San Fran. This game is expected to be a close game with KC only being favored by 2.5 points, which I think actually bodes pretty well for San Fran's offense. And a little bit for their defense, saying that they're going to hold KC to only 25.5 points, which is a pretty big statement for both San Fran's defense and really San Fran's offense, saying that they're going to score 23 against KC, which is not a bad projection considering what most bookies put out there. I'm not excited about Mecole Hardman, Jerick McKinnon. I will throw a little bit of MVS in there just because you never know who's going to get the rock there. And also Hardman and DFS and stuff like that. I don't mind that play because, again, you never know who's going to get in the end zone with KC, expecting them to get there. Before we jump into the 8 o'clock game, I just want to shout out another one of our sponsors, and that is Underdog. Rocking the merch, Underdog. Use the promo code FAQS, that's FAQS. You will get a deposit match for your first deposit of $100, 100% up to $100 on that first deposit. It is a great deal, especially if your season has been going in the wrong direction and you want to have a little bit more fun. Underdog provides weekly drafts, which, let's be honest, drafting is one of the best parts of the fantasy experience. You can do it weekly live against other players. You're not just setting a lineup. They also have Pick'em, which is a great option. It allows you to choose higher or lower on player stats. It can be rushes, it can be pass attempts, it could be fantasy points. You can do rivalries, which I think is a ton of fun. And it just multiplies the more you pick, multiplies all the way up. It is a great, great time. Check out our good friends over at Underdog. All right. That leads us right into our Sunday night game, which is Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Miami. Just like Dak coming back from injury, we have Tua coming back from injury. I want to fire up Tua because I feel like he has plenty of options there, but I am definitely nervous about putting him into lineups. This is another situation where if I want to stay floor, I may play a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo with a relatively easy matchup against Kansas City over a guy like Tua, who I think has higher upside. And I don't think many people would disagree with the upside there, but his health makes me a whole lot more concerned. Yes, concussions are not like a soft tissue injury or a tendon or ligament injury where the more stress you put on it, the more likely it is for it to be re-aggravated. Concussions are all a whole nother beast, all in and of themselves. But I want to see how Tua comes back and plays before I'm happy rolling him out into my offense. With that said, I am still going to play Hill. I'm still going to play Waddle. I don't really like rolling Mostert out there, even though he's kind of taken on that lead role in this. I would play him if I'm RB desperate. That's perfectly fine. But I do think that there's a little bit of game plan dependency that could happen with this backfield with Mostert and Chase Edmonds in that backfield. Mike Gesicki has been slowly kind of coming on. I think it's going to be a week by week kind of coin flip of does Gesicki get one of those end zone looks, or does it go to Hill? Does it go to Waddle? Does Mostert get that rushing attempt at the goal line? And I think you're going to be again kind of rolling the dice each time, trying to guess when Gesicki's going to have his good game. Which makes him more or less a sit for me, unless I have a little bit more information coming out, which it does look like Waddle is on the injury list as a limited participant, which boosts Hill a little bit, boosts Gesicki a little bit if Waddle is going to miss this game. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, though. This could just be one of those Wednesday Veteran Day type of situations. On the Pittsburgh side of the ball, woof. Not much there. You're playing Deontay Johnson on sheer volume. You're playing Najee Harris on sheer volume. I'm not playing Kenny Pickett unless I'm absolutely completely desperate in a super flex, maybe. But man, I might break. I might commit the cardinal sin of Superflex and actually play somebody other than a quarterback if Kenny Pickett is my quarterback option there. Claypool, Pickens, you're basically hoping that they come on to be the guy. Pickens has been slowly becoming the guy, but man, this offense is just extremely tough to be able to pick and choose what's going to happen with it. And that just makes me not excited for it at all. And there's nothing to like here in Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, Pittsburgh fans, nothing to like in Pittsburgh. You're hoping to see something in this game because Miami's defense hasn't been great. So you're hoping to see something. You're hoping to get something out of these guys. But man, oh man, it has been tough sledding for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, our last game of the week is the second lowest over-under of the week, and that is Chicago Bears, the Bears, traveling to New England, an over-under of 39.5. Again, second lowest, only to the Jets and the Broncos. Man, you're starting a handful of guys in this league, in this game, and you're starting them pretty confidently, I feel like, and that's going to be Ramondre Stevenson, as you can start him as a starting back in your lineup. Hopefully you can flex them and you have some other guys up there because you were probably able to take him pretty late. You're playing Jacoby Myers, again, another guy that probably you got really late, hopefully is a flex play, but you're going to go ahead and start him. And that's regardless of which quarterback is starting. Where there was talk about quarterback controversy in Dallas, that's not really going to happen. This one, we might see it a little bit more. It looks like Mac Jones was another limited participant. He's questionable. He didn't play when he was questionable last week. He's questionable again this week. We may see Bailey Zappi for a third time. And he played pretty well last week. 2 touchdowns, over 300 yards passing. We could see him kind of coming into his own again this week. With that said, I'm not playing Devontae Parker. I'm not playing Thornton yet. I am picking him up if you haven't already. If he's still on waivers, go ahead and scoop him up. I'm not playing him yet. I'm also not playing Hunter Henry. Damian Harris is questionable again. I'm not playing him. Nothing really else out there that I'm playing on this lineup. And the quarterbacks I'm not really playing unless it's just sheer desperation type of plays. On the flip side of it, I am not playing Justin Fields. He just does not throw the ball enough to make it worthwhile for you. And he hasn't been rushing the ball like a Kyler Murray 100-yard rushing type of game like we saw last week. Yes, there is some upside there with Fields rushing the ball, but it hasn't been consistent enough where I think you can really roll him out with any type of confidence this week. David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert are the 2 big question marks here. It's whether or not Khalil Herbert can jump over David Montgomery. He definitely looks more explosive, but David Montgomery is getting just so many more touches than Khalil Herbert is. So it makes it very, very tough to try and pick and choose which one of these guys is going to be the guy. I think you kind of have to roll out David Montgomery if you have him. Khalil Herbert becomes a flex play, an upside flex play that is, high risk, high reward, really low floor if Herbert doesn't get into the end zone or break off just a monster run, or unless David Montgomery gets injured, there's just a super low floor there for Khalil Herbert, but plenty upside if any of those things do happen, which to me makes him, just a really risky start and a guy that I'm not that excited about playing. Darnell Mooney, hopefully you found somebody else to play in there. Darnell Mooney has had some opportunities where it looks like he's going to kind of take over a little bit more. He's going to break out, if you will, and we're still just kind of waiting for that big game. And outside of that, I think there's not much that you can do. Cole Kmet has been a sit or kicked to the waiver wire. Same thing with Equinemius St. Brown and Dante Pettis, even though Dante scored. And Equinemius had, I think he was the one that had the near touchdown that he dropped pretty much at the goal line on a big play. But not a whole lot to love in this game at all, except for really Ramondre. Love Ramondre. Go ahead and fire him up wherever you can. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for the rapid rundown. Make sure you check out fantasydata.com. All of the numbers that I'm pulling here are coming from Fantasy Data. I have the premium subscription that allows me to download all of this information, work my magic on my back end spreadsheets, but they put a lot of great information out there that is easily accessible for anybody right on their website. If you're not a math nerdy stat type of guy like I am, make sure you check out Fantasy Data. Use the promo code FAQS, that's FAQS, and you will get 20% off your subscription, not prescription. We're not dealing. That's selling drugs here. Off your subscription. Check them out, Fantasy Data. Also, check out our good friends over at Underdog. They'll match up to $100, 100% of $100 of your first deposit. Check them out. And make sure you give me a follow. I am on the Twitters at FFTheAtHomeDad. And the show is on Twitter at The Fantasy Facts. Give us a follow. Thank you. Check you later. Catch you on the flip side.